Now, I want to introduce our turner for today, who is one of our PAW members. You all know him because most of you have signed in over here. Dave Henderson is currently our membership director. He has been a member of PAW since August of 2022. He just started turning in 2017, he's told me. So he's come a long ways in a fairly short time. He's going to demonstrate today how he has a setup to make a Celtic knot. His demonstration will be a Celtic knot on a hand tool, a gouge handle. And on Tuesday demo, next Tuesday, he will also be doing this same or similar part of this demo at his shop. And correct me if I say this wrong, 4137 Tonopah?
Tonopah.
Tonopah in Prescott Valley. So be sure you show up for his Tuesday demo next Tuesday. It'll be at, oh, by the way, he's also the featured artist this month on the PAW website. So go out to the website, look him up. He's got some pieces in the gallery. You see his breadth of turning skills. It's more than just Celtic knots. So I'd like to introduce Dave Henderson as our demonstrator today, who's going to teach you how to make Celtic knots.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So my name's Dave Henderson, as you know. Glad to be standing up here doing this for y'all. A couple of people approached me when they were coming in, like, what in the world is a Celtic knot? So if I can get these guys to bring up my presentation, we'll just go ahead and start there. There we go. In the meantime, though, I always got some neat show and tell stuff. And I have to I have to go back a little bit. I'm going to pass these around. You can see the Celtic knots on those handles. So my first dean, when I was taking his class, right at the end of the class, he said, why don't you turn a tool handle? And I was like, okay. So Chuck said, I got a piece of stock you can use. So I went over to Chuck's, and then Chuck goes, why don't you put a Celtic knot in it? I was like, what the hell is a Celtic knot? So I went and looked that up, and we worked through it and ended up doing everything. And that larger tool was my first attempt at a Celtic knot. So anyway, so a little bit of history. If you can go to the next slide, a little bit of history about the Celtic knot. It's an Irish thing. It's a Celtic thing. It started way back. Some of the first Celtic knots were found around 450 A.D. In the end of the Roman era. And since I didn't memorize this slide, I'm going to kind of cheat as soon as it gets up there and read some of it to you. But so it's used. It's a decorative thing. Back then, it was called insular art, which means that only they did it. They didn't allow anybody else to look at their stuff. And so I'm kind of thinking a bunch of Celts sitting around trying to design these little knots, and no telling what they were smoking. But timeout.
We have broadcast quality equipment. Not so sure about the people.
So what we're going to learn today is I'm going to take you through the steps. This is a very, very easy process, but there's a couple of little things that are nice to know before you get started so you can kind of plan ahead. Okay, so the origins, like I said, were from the Roman Empire period around 450 A.D. There's some there's some symbolism in the Celtic knots. The main thing is Celtic knots are endless, so you should never be able to find the end of the knot on a Celtic knot, which is what makes them so special. And like I said before, they're considered insular art. They adorn manuscripts, jewelry, architectural stuff. They're found everywhere in history. What the Celts put Celtic knots on stuff, and I'm sure everybody's seen these Celtic knots. And a lot of people they carve the Celtic knots, and you can do that in woodworking as well. But we're not gonna carve anything today. So next slide, please. So there's just some examples of some Celtic knots that show there's no end to the lines. They continue to go. There's also some meaning to the Celtic knot. Some of it is religious. It has to do with the Trinity, and some of it has to do with life and water and sky and all this kind of stuff. So next slide. So Celtic knots and wood turning is what we're going to talk about today. And you'll see that it's pretty much always used in cylindrical type things. So mostly it's spindle turning. You can see here, this one kind of blows my mind because it's a pen with 8 Celtic knots on it. And I don't know. I have no idea how that was done. No idea. But rolling pins and things like that, multiple Celtic knots can be applied to the pieces that you're working on. I'm only going to do one Celtic knot. Next slide. So in wood turning, we create the Celtic knot by using a sled. And so you need a table saw or a bandsaw. Either one can be used. The table saw I find a little easier than the bandsaw. But the idea is you have this jig that goes in a table saw and it slides through the blade, and it has a fence on it that's at 30 degrees. Anywhere, you can do anywhere from 20 to 30 degrees. Usually makes a nice Celtic knot. And you place your piece of wood and you line it up. There, I put a line here so I knew exactly where this piece would go each time. And when I say each time, you make one cut, you glue in a veneer, and then you turn it 90 degrees, you make another cut, turn it 90 degrees, make another cut, turn it 90 degrees, and now you've made 4 cuts on the table saw. But each time you have to insert the veneer in and glue it in, and it needs to dry, obviously. You don't want to be turning wet glued stuff on a lathe. So what's on the next slide? So here's a little video. It kind of shows the sled going through the table saw blade. And there's a couple of things I'll point out on the video once the video runs. You do want to make sure that your hand is away from the blade. This is very important. And the other thing that you'll notice here in this video is that I've placed a stop. You can see a little black thing right in front of the sled. That's a stop that's anchored to my table saw to keep the sled from going all the way through. You don't want to cut through your sled. That's a bad day if you do that. You just have 2 halves of a sled. And let's see if there's anything else I need to point out there. So the piece gets clamped down so it doesn't move. So you need some way to clamp it. What I did on mine was I added these little clamps like this. Can anybody see those clamps? I added those to hold it down. It doesn't take much to hold it down, just like you would do with anything else that you're going to put through a table saw. The other thing that's important is the veneer, the thickness of the veneer, and the width of your cut. And in this case, you can see this has a cut in it, but it's not cut all the way through. So we leave about a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch of material and don't cut all the way through. And that helps with the glue up. So when you go to place your veneer in here with glue, you're looking for a slip fit because you need to allow for the glue. If you make this too tight and you try to glue it in, bad things. So this is a slip fit. I'm going to pass this around so everybody kind of feel what it's like for a slip fit. And then there's a couple of other things as well to note. And that is, if your veneer is thicker than your blade, when you make the blade cut, your veneer won't fit. So what do? So in that case, what we do is so here's a stop on this sled right here. And I would put my piece up against the stop. I would make my cut, and then I would pull it out, and I would figure out how thick my veneer is compared to how wide my blade is, and I would make a spacer. And then take the spacer and attach it here, bring my block up against the spacer, and make another cut. And now I've made a cut that's wide enough for my veneer to go in. The bowl gouge that's being passed around right now was done that way. It had two cuts on each side because my veneer was thicker than my blade. Now, if your veneer is thinner than your blade, this causes some extra problems because you'll need to cut your block all the way through because your veneer is thinner than your blade. So you'll make the cut with your blade, and then you'll glue the two pieces of veneer together. I mean, the two blocks together with the veneer on the inside. And it's a little difficult because you're fighting the angle of the two individual pieces. So it's a pain to put it together. You got to get a clamp on each end to hold it endwise. You got to get clamps along the side to hold it along the side. So it's better to shoot for a veneer that fits your blade size. Okay. Next slide. I don't know if there's too much more to talk about. Oh, this is very simple. So in this case, you can see I have a stop right here, but the pieces that are going around are way shorter than using the stop. So I just put a line. And so every time I turn it and rotate it, I just line it up with that one line on the sled. And the sled has two runners on it. Put two runners so it'll run on a table saw. And it's pretty simple.
Dave, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you said that you need to allow room for glue, but when you're in passing this around, it seems very snug. How much room do you really leave for the glue?
As long as it has a slip fit where you can slide it in and out, and you can see on that one you can slide it, that's enough. Yeah, that's enough. But if you're using like I use Titebond glue, Titebond 3. If you were using something thicker like epoxy or something like that, and if you used epoxy, like a 5-minute or 10-minute epoxy, you could do this probably all in one day. But when I do it with glue, I put a clamp on it. I wait till the next day, and I put it in, turn it, cut another cut, do it next day. So it takes me 4 days to make one. I know. But if you use epoxy's a little thicker. I would make the veneer a little bit thinner, so that you have a little bit looser fit so that epoxy can get down in there. Rick?
Reinforcement in that to give it strength. If you were to drill like a dowel or something through the center to give it more strength, would you do that?
I haven't done that yet. I haven't seen the need.
Haven't had one come apart yet?
Yeah, no, I think if you're going to make a tool handle like I did, that's a maple that I made the tool handles out of. And the piece that I'm passing around, that's the square block, that's just a piece of poplar. I wouldn't normally use that for making like a tool handle or anything. But was there another slide after that? So I can't, here's a finished one. Not finished, it's not turned obviously, but it has all 4 of the pieces of veneer glued in. And it's important when you glue the veneer in that you don't have any sticking out of the sides. If you do, you need to trim that off, sand that off so that when you turn it, it doesn't lift on your sled and move around. So you want that nice and smooth. Okay. So this is the one I'm going to turn into a Celtic knot. Are we? So here are the basic steps. So there, you select the wood, you choose a block of wood slightly thicker than what you want your end product to be, obviously. And you trim it as square as possible on all 4 sides. Choose a contrasting wood for the inserts so that you can see them. You cut slices of wood to fit into the slots. You make sure you allow for glue. That's very important. And then you set up the tools. You get your blade height set up on your table saw. You want to make sure that you measure your blade height so that you leave a slight bit, so you don't cut it completely in half. And then you attach a stop block, or in my case, I just used a line. You just got to make sure you remember to put it back on a line every time, or your Celtic knot will be skewed. Okay, and then the steps 4 through 6. You make the cuts. What I do is I number all 4 sides. I start with number 1, make that cut, turn it to number 2, make that cut, number 3, and so forth. You cut slots into each side from the same direction each time. And I forgot to mention that on the sled, I think I mentioned it, the angle of the fence is on this sled is like 30 degrees. So you can see the 30 degrees will give you that Celtic knot that's on the pieces that are passed around. That's the angle that you'll see. You just basically repeat it from all sides. You continue until all sides are complete, and then you turn it on the lathe. You fit the block to the lathe, you turn the piece of the desired shape, and as you shape the wood, the Celtic knot will appear. Does anybody don't believe that a Celtic knot's in here somewhere? Yeah. So shop notes, check the fit of the veneer before adding glue. Some sanding may be necessary. Gently clamp the veneer. I just put one clamp across it just to hold it. Like I said, if you had to cut it all the way in two to use a thinner veneer than your blade, or yeah, thinner veneer than your blade, then you would have to put multiple clamps to hold it together and try to keep it as straight as possible. Next.
Dave,
I went over this already. Yep.
I have a question.
Shoot.
If you used a table saw to cut those, and the thickness of the blade is thicker, obviously, than a bandsaw, could you maybe use 2 or 3 pieces of veneer to take that space?
Sure, you could laminate your veneers to make up the space. Yep. The bandsaw, of course, a bandsaw blade is like, less than a 1/16 of an inch usually. And your veneers have to be pretty thin to fit in there. Imagine I would use a bandsaw if I was making pens or something like that. I haven't actually used the bandsaw because this is just way too easy to do on a table saw. But on the bandsaw, obviously, when you're running it through, the blade's this way. So you want to run it through and have some kind of a stop to where you don't go all the way through in this direction rather than in this direction. Is that clear?
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions before I turn on this machine back here? Nope. Okay. I have more notes. Oh, a flat grind saw blade works well, but it's not essential. A flat grind saw blade will leave you a square bottom right here rather than a, bottom on an angle. But I think you're probably going to turn that away anyway. But I just put that as a side note because I have a flat grinded blade, so I thought it might be important. And there you go. So you're all looking at this one as it passes around. You guys ready to see this turned? Yep. Got another question? Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, if you're doing the double Celtic knot, if you're doing the double Celtic knot, do you cut both kerfs or both cuts and then glue it in, or do you have to do 8 separate glue ups?
8 separate glue ups. You would make one all the way around, and then you would move your blank, however much distance you want between the 2 Celtic knots, and then you would cut that. Now, you can also change angles too, and do some different stuff. When you change angle, it makes the Celtic knot either longer or shorter. So if the angle is less acute, the Celtic knot's going to be much smaller. Or did I say that backwards? I don't know. When you guys do it, y'all let me know how that works. Okay. Does that answer your question, Mike? Yep. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Just talk amongst yourselves while I get this going here. Yeah, I know you will. Yeah. This one? Make sure it's pushed this way. Oh, is that the headstock? Should I do it again? Oh, I thought I was pumping it up so it would turn. Oh. Okay, I got to get my gear on here, so you guys bear with me. No, I have, I'm just gonna use a roughing gouge to round it out. Okay. Let's rough. Spence, how fast should I spin it? Spence yelled at me last time I did this, said, speed it up. Okay, here we go. Do you guys have it on the camera that you want? Pray for me. I'm going to be really shocked if there's not a Celtic knot in here. I'm going to stop kind of once I get it smoothed out a little bit and let you see what it looks like as it starts to develop. Because what you'll find is your Celtic knot will appear before you really know it. And if you go too far, you know, you're still going to have a Celtic knot in there, but it might be smaller than what you wanted. Ooh. 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 Oh, you want to turn it? Starting to look like something. Well, I'm done. Yep. This is for you, Spence. Let's check in on our Celtic knot. Just about got it. Can we get an overhead? There you go. Is that focused? I did it. I did it. Get there. There you go. So we got a little bit more to go before we see she's not quite connected right here. Wow. Ooh, that made me dizzy. Okay, while they're getting that sorted out, we're going to go a little more. I'm gonna pass this around, so I want to make sure it kind of looks pretty. I know what you're thinking, man, that guy's supposed to be all that in a bag of chips and he passed this around. Mm. Let's see where we're at. There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think unless there's some questions, that probably concludes. Yeah, so his question was with the veneer, when you glue it in, are you gluing both sides of the veneer as well as the bottom when you glue it in? Right? And yeah, what I do is I just take the block that I'm going to stick the veneer in and I just run a bead of glue on the outside. And then when I push the veneer in from the top, I just expect it to push that glue all the way down to the bottom. And then also put it on both sides of the veneer as well too. A thin coat, just a thin coat. Good question. Yeah.
Any more questions?